The glass tower. Rohan Malhotra stood at the floor-to-ceiling window of his penthouse office, watching Mumbai's skyline glitter beneath him. At 38, he had built quantum innovations from a tiny startup into India's most valuable tech company. The financial papers called him brilliant. His competitors called him ruthless. His employees called him Sir, with a mixture of respect and fear. Nobody called him a friend. "The projections for next quarter look promising, sir," said Vikram, his chief financial officer, sliding a tablet across the sleek conference table, "particularly in Southeast Asia." Rohan nodded without turning from the window. Rain had begun to fall, droplets racing down the glass like tears he hadn't shed since childhood. "What about the Bangalore acquisition?" "The board is hesitant. They're concerned about the pace of expansion." Now Rohan turned, his expression hardening. "The board hired me to make decisions, not to hesitate. Schedule an emergency meeting for tomorrow morning." Vikram shifted uncomfortably. "Tomorrow is Sunday, sir." "And?" "It's Diwali. Many board members have family obligations." Rohan's jaw tightened. "Diwali, of course." He'd forgotten entirely. Not that it mattered. He hadn't celebrated any holidays since his parents died 15 years ago. "Fine. Monday morning, then. First thing." After Vikram left, Rohan returned to his desk, surrounded by awards and accolades, but not a single personal photograph. He had everything society deemed valuable: wealth, power, intelligence. Yet the sprawling apartment he returned to each night echoed with emptiness. His phone buzzed with a text from his younger sister, Priya. "Happy Diwali, bye. Please come to dinner tomorrow. The kids miss their uncle." Rohan set the phone down without responding. His relationship with Priya had grown strained over the years. She couldn't understand his single-minded focus on work, just as he couldn't understand her choice to become a teacher when she could have been his company's legal counsel. "Sentiment is inefficient," he murmured to himself, repeating the mantra that had carried him through countless negotiations and difficult decisions. He had watched too many brilliant minds derailed by emotional entanglements. His college roommate abandoned a promising research career for marriage. His former business partner stepped back from their venture to care for an ailing parent, forcing Rohan to buy him out before launching Quantum. The rain intensified, drumming against the glass. Rohan gathered his laptop and coat, nodding curtly to the night security guard as he made his way to the private garage beneath the building. His custom Tesla hummed to life as he settled into the driver's seat. "Home," he commanded the AI system. "Weather alert," the car responded. "Heavy thunderstorm warning in effect. Alternative route suggested." "Proceed on primary route," Rohan insisted. He wasn't afraid of a little rain, and he had reports to review before bed. As he drove through Mumbai's thinning traffic, his mind remained on the Bangalore acquisition. The board's hesitation was frustrating, but not surprising. They lacked his vision, his understanding that in business, opportunities waited for no one. Relationships, personal commitments, celebrations, all were luxuries that successful people couldn't afford. Lightning flashed across the sky as Rohan's phone rang through the car's speakers. It was Ananya, the head of product development, calling about a critical software issue. He accelerated slightly, splitting his attention between the storm-slick road and the technical details Ananya was explaining. "Implement the patch immediately," he said. "I don't care if the team has to work through Diwali. Our customers don't pay us to observe holidays." "But, sir, the team has been working 16-hour days for weeks. They need to understand that excellence requires sacrifice," Rohan interrupted, not noticing how the rain had turned the highway into a treacherous mirror. "I've never taken a day off in 15 years, and that's why—" The truck ahead of him suddenly braked. Rohan swerved sharply, but the Tesla hydroplaned, spinning wildly across 3 lanes. He felt a strange calmness as the guardrail approached, thinking only of the unfinished work on his laptop. In his final moment of consciousness, as metal screamed against metal and glass shattered around him, Rohan Malhotra had a fleeting, unexpected thought. Is this really all there was to my life? Then darkness claimed him, and the rain continued, to fall on the wreckage of his carefully controlled world. The storm's mercy. Zara Sharma wasn't supposed to be on that stretch of highway. The community arts center where she worked as an art therapist was in the opposite direction, but a last-minute call from the hospice had sent her rushing across. The city with a portfolio of paintings created by her terminally ill patients. The exhibition was tomorrow, Diwali, a celebration of light in the hospice's otherwise somber corridors. When she saw the Tesla spinning out of control, her first instinct was to brake. Her second, inexplicably, was to pull over. Stay in the car, she told herself as rain lashed against her windshield. But then she saw flames flickering beneath the crumpled hood, and her body moved before her mind could object. The highway was eerily deserted in the storm. Zara ran toward the wreckage, her cotton kurta soaking through instantly. The driver was unconscious, blood trickling from his temple. Through the shattered window, she could see the airbags had deployed, but the car's frame had buckled dangerously close to his chest. "Hello? Can you hear me?" she called, trying the door. It was jammed. The flames were growing. Panic surged through her, but Zara forced it down, remembering her emergency training from her volunteer work. With strength born of desperation, she managed to wrench the door open just enough to reach in and release the seatbelt. Somehow, she would never remember exactly how, she dragged the unconscious man from the vehicle. They had barely cleared the car when it erupted into flames behind them. In the ambulance that arrived minutes later, Zara held the stranger's hand, noticing how, even unconscious, his brow remained furrowed, as if he were solving complex problems in his dreams. "Do you know him?" the paramedic asked. Zara shook her head, then hesitated as recognition dawned. "Wait, I think he's Rohan Malhotra, the tech billionaire." "Well, he's lucky you came along," the paramedic said, inserting an IV. "Another minute in that car." At Leelavati Hospital, Zara intended to leave once she'd given her statement to the police. She had her exhibition to prepare for, patients who were counting on her. But something kept her there. Perhaps the fact that no one else had arrived for him yet, despite the hospital's calls to his emergency contacts. "Family should be here soon," a nurse assured her as they wheeled Rohan into surgery. "You've done more than enough." 3 hours later, Zara remained in the waiting room, her clothes still damp, scrolling through news articles about the man whose life she'd saved. Rohan Malhotra, programming prodigy, ruthless businessman, notoriously private. Most photos showed him in immaculate suits at product launches or economic forums, always alone, never smiling. "Ms. Sharma?" A doctor approached, looking exhausted. "Mr. Malhotra is stable. The surgery went well, but he has multiple fractures and a moderate concussion. He's asking about his laptop." Zara couldn't help but give a surprised laugh. His laptop? Not "Where am I?" or "What happened?" The doctor smiled wryly. Apparently it contained critical company data. "I told him the police recovered his belongings, but the laptop was destroyed in the fire." "How did he take that?" "Not well. Would you like to see him? He should know who saved his life." Zara hesitated. "I'm not family." "No family has arrived yet," the doctor said quietly. "Just some company executives who seemed more concerned about stock prices than his condition." Something in Zara's chest tightened. She followed the doctor to a private room where Rohan Malhotra lay connected to monitors, his leg elevated in a cast, bandages across his chest and forehead. Despite his injuries, he was arguing with a nurse about getting a replacement laptop delivered. "Mr. Malhotra," the doctor interrupted. "This is Zara Sharma. She pulled you from your car before it exploded." Rohan's dark eyes fixed on her, assessing, rather than grateful. "You're the one who dragged me out?" Zara nodded, suddenly self-conscious in her rumpled, stained clothes. "I was driving by." "You could have been killed." His voice was matter-of-fact. "That was an unnecessary risk." The doctor and nurse exchanged glances and quietly left the room. "Unnecessary?" Zara repeated, disbelief rising. "You would have died." "I appreciate the intervention," Rohan said stiffly, "but you shouldn't have endangered yourself. The statistical likelihood of success in such a rescue attempt—" "I wasn't calculating statistics," Zara interrupted. "I saw someone who needed help, so I helped. That's what humans do." A flicker of something, confusion perhaps, crossed his face before his expression hardened again. "Well, thank you for your assistance. I'll have my office send you compensation." "I don't want your money, Mr. Malhotra." Zara picked up her bag, suddenly eager to leave. What had she expected? That he'd be transformed by his brush with death? "Then what do you want?" The question seemed genuine, as if the concept of acting without expectation of reward was foreign to him. Zara paused at the door. "Nothing. Although—" She turned back. "Tomorrow is Diwali. I'm hosting an art exhibition at Shanti Hospice, paintings by terminal patients. If you're feeling better, you might find it illuminating." "I'll be working tomorrow," he replied automatically. "With a concussion and broken bones? I doubt the doctors will allow that." She smiled slightly. "Sometimes the universe forces us to pause, Mr. Malhotra. Maybe this is your moment to see what exists beyond spreadsheets and acquisitions." As she left, Zara wondered why she'd extended the invitation. Perhaps it was the profound loneliness she'd glimpsed beneath his business-like exterior. Or maybe it was because in her years working with the dying, she'd learned to recognize those who were alive but not truly living. Outside, the storm had cleared, leaving Mumbai washed clean. Stars peeked through breaks in the clouds. Zara checked. Her phone, 15 missed calls from her mother, worried about her late arrival home. Tomorrow was Diwali, the festival of lights triumphing over darkness. As she drove away from the hospital, Zara couldn't help wondering if some small light might have been kindled in the darkness she'd sensed in Rohan Malhotra. But even as she thought it, she shook her head at her own naivete. Men like him didn't change because of chance encounters with strangers. His world of wealth and power would reclaim him, and this strange intersection of their lives would fade into memory. Little did she know how wrong she was. Unexpected reflections. The hospital room was silent except for the steady beep of monitors and the occasional squeak of nurses' shoes in the corridor. Rohan stared at the ceiling, his mind racing despite the painkillers. His phone had been destroyed. In the crash, isolating him from the constant stream of emails and messages that structured his existence. "This is inefficient," he muttered, pressing the call button for the 4th time in an hour. Nurse Deepak entered with practiced patience. "Yes, Mr. Malhotra. I need my assistant to bring a new laptop and phone immediately. As I mentioned earlier, Dr. Mehra has restricted all work activities for at least 48 hours. Your brain needs rest to recover from the concussion." Rohan's frustration mounted. "Do you know how much money my company loses every hour I'm disconnected?" Deepak adjusted an IV bag, unperturbed. "Do you know how much time you lose if you don't recover properly? Some things can't be measured in rupees, sir." After the nurse left, Rohan's thoughts drifted unexpectedly to Zara Sharma. Her invitation to a hospice art exhibition seemed absurd. Why would he spend Diwali looking at paintings by dying people? Yet her parting words echoed, "Sometimes the universe forces us to pause." His sister Priya arrived mid-morning, her eyes red from crying. "The hospital called me 5 times before I checked my phone," she said, taking his hand. "I thought I'd lost you too." Rohan squeezed her fingers awkwardly. Physical affection had become foreign to him. I'm fine. Just some broken bones. You could have died, Rohan. Her voice broke. Just like Ma and Papa. The mention of their parents sent a familiar pang through him. The car accident that took them had set him on his relentless path. Work became his shield against grief, success his revenge against fate's cruelty. But I didn't die, he said softly. Someone pulled me out. Who? A woman named Zara Sharma. She was passing by. Priya wiped her eyes. I need to thank her. Did she leave contact information? She invited me to an art exhibition at a hospice. His sister's expression brightened. Shanti Hospice? I know it. My school volunteers there. Their art therapy program is remarkable. You've heard of it? Of course. The therapist, that must be Zara, uses art to help terminal patients process their emotions. Many say she helps them find peace before they go. Priya studied him. You should attend. I need to get back to work. The doctors say you'll be here for days. She gestured to his casted leg and bandaged ribs. Besides, it's Diwali. Even, you deserve one day off. After Priya left, promising to return with his niece and nephew later, Rohan found himself alone with thoughts he usually suppressed. The crash had forced an unfamiliar stillness upon him, and in that stillness, uncomfortable questions surfaced. What if he had died in that Tesla? What would his legacy be beyond quantum innovation's stock price? By afternoon, restlessness drove him to do something unprecedented. He asked Nurse Deepak about the hospice exhibition. Shanti Hospice? Yes. They're having their Diwali exhibition today. My cousin volunteers there. Deepak studied Rohan with newfound interest. Were you planning to attend? I can't exactly walk, Rohan gestured to his leg. We have wheelchairs, Deepak replied with a hint of challenge. And the hospice is only 2 blocks away. I could arrange transportation if you're genuinely interested. Something in the nurse's tone, skepticism perhaps, pricked Rohan's pride. Yes, arrange it. 2 hours later, Rohan found himself being wheeled into Shanti Hospice, feeling ridiculously out of place in hospital pajamas covered by a borrowed kurta. The hospice lobby had been transformed with marigold garlands, rangoli patterns on the floor, and dozens of earthen lamps. Unlike the sterile hospital, this place smelled of incense and spices. The exhibition occupied a large sunlit room where paintings hung on every wall. Visitors moved between them, speaking in hushed, reverent tones. Rohan immediately spotted Zara across the room, dressed in a simple yellow sari, explaining a painting to an elderly couple. When she saw him, her eyes widened in genuine surprise. She excused herself and came over. Mr. Malhotra, I didn't expect you would come. Neither did I, he admitted. Your invitation was compelling. Zara smiled, the expression transforming her face. Well, since you're here, let me show you around. For the next hour, she guided him through the exhibition, explaining the stories behind each painting. An elderly man with pancreatic cancer had painted his childhood village from memory. A young woman with leukemia created abstract explosions of color that represented her dreams for a future she wouldn't see. This one, Zara said, stopping before a simple painting of hands holding a lotus, was created by Mrs. Desai. She was a mathematics teacher who never painted in her life until she came here. She said she spent her whole life working with numbers, and only at the end did she discover the poetry in creating something with her hands. Rohan studied the painting, unexpectedly moved. Where is she now? I'd like to meet her. Zara's expression softened. She passed away last week, but she finished this painting first. She said it represented what she'd learned, that beauty emerges from the muddiest waters. A lump formed in Rohan's throat. He looked around the room with new eyes, suddenly understanding that every artwork represented someone's final statement to the world. "How do you do this?" he asked quietly. "Work with people who are dying? Isn't it inefficient?" "Inefficient?" Zara repeated, bewildered. "They'll be gone soon. The investment of your time and resources won't generate long-term returns." Instead of being offended, Zara smiled thoughtfully. "That's an interesting perspective. But I measure returns differently. When someone discovers joy or peace in their final days, that's immeasurable value. When their families have a tangible reminder of their loved one's spirit, that's generational impact." As she spoke, a small commotion at the door drew their attention. A group of children entered, led by a familiar figure, Priya, with Rohan's niece and nephew among them. "Rohan!" Priya exclaimed, surprised. "You actually came!" The children from her school surrounded his wheelchair, curious about his injuries. His 7-year-old niece, Arti, handed him a handmade Diwali card. "This is to help you feel better, Mama," she said, using the affectionate term for maternal uncle. Rohan accepted it awkwardly, realizing he couldn't remember the last gift he'd received that wasn't a business formality. As the evening progressed, Rohan observed Zara interacting with patients, families, and visitors. Unlike his corporate world where every conversation was a negotiation, people here spoke with rare authenticity. A dying businessman discussed regrets with a teenage artist. A hospice volunteer shared sweets with a grieving family. Zara moved through it all with gentle purpose, creating connections between strangers who had only one certainty in common: the preciousness of time. When Priya and the children prepared to leave, promising to visit him at the hospital tomorrow, Rohan was startled to realize 3 hours had passed without him checking the time once. As Nurse Deepak arrived to take him back to the hospital, Rohan caught Zara's hand. "Thank you," he said, the words unfamiliar on his tongue. "This was illuminating." "Diwali is about light defeating darkness," she replied simply. "I'm glad you found some light today." That night, lying in his hospital bed, Rohan couldn't stop thinking about the exhibition. For 15 years, he had measured everything in terms of efficiency, productivity, and profit. But at the hospice, he had glimpsed a different economy. One that valued moments over money, connection over acquisition. For the first time since his parents' death, Rohan Malhotra fell asleep without thinking about work. His dreams filled with painted hands holding lotus flowers, emerging from the mud, toward the light. The value exchange. 3 days after the accident, Rohan was discharged from the hospital with strict instructions to rest at home for 2 weeks. The doctors had confiscated his hastily delivered replacement laptop, conspiring with Priya to enforce his recovery. His phone, however, remained his tenuous connection to quantum innovations, where Vikram was temporarily managing operations. "The board meeting went well," Vikram reported during their daily call. "We've postponed the Bangalore acquisition decision until your return." "Postponed?" Rohan frowned at the ceiling of his penthouse bedroom. "That wasn't the plan." "With respect, sir, your accident has given us perspective. Some opportunities are worth waiting for, and some pauses are necessary." The words echoed Zara's sentiment so closely that Rohan fell silent, unsettled by the coincidence. "There is one concerning development," Vikram continued. "The community center near our headquarters. They're facing eviction. The building owner is selling to developers." "Why is this our concern?" Rohan asked, though something nagged at his memory. "It's been generating negative press. The center serves underprivileged children and provides art therapy for trauma survivors. Several employees have asked if Quantum might intervene, given our community engagement initiatives." Rohan had always viewed corporate social responsibility as a necessary public relations expense rather than a mission, but now he sat up straighter. "What's the name of this center?" "Umeed. It means hope." Send me the details, Rohan said, his mind already connecting unlikely dots. That afternoon, using the pretext of a doctor's appointment, Rohan had his driver take him to Umeed Center. The modest, two-story building sat wedged between upscale developments in a rapidly gentrifying neighborhood. A hand-painted sign featured children's handprints surrounding the word Umeed. Inside, the center hummed with activity. Children practiced dance in one corner, while elderly women taught traditional embroidery to teenagers in another. The walls displayed artwork similar to what he'd seen at the hospice, raw, honest expressions ranging from pain to joy. "Can I help you?" A middle-aged man approached, eyeing Rohan's designer clothes and the driver hovering behind him. "I'm looking for Zara Sharma. She's in the back studio with her trauma group. Is she expecting you?" "No," Rohan admitted, "but it's important." The man led him through a corridor lined with more artwork to a sunlit room where Zara sat in a circle with 5 women, all focused on clay sculptures forming beneath their fingers. She wore simple jeans and a kurta, her hair tied back, hands covered in clay. When she noticed him, surprise flashed across her face. "Mr. Malhotra, I apologize for interrupting," Rohan said, suddenly aware of how out of place he looked with his walking cast and Italian loafers. Zara excused herself from the group and approached him. "How did you find me?" "A coincidence. My company headquarters is nearby, and I heard this center is facing eviction." He gestured to the space around them. "This is where you work?" She nodded. 4 days a week. The other 3 I'm at Shanti Hospice. You didn't mention this place was in trouble. Why would I? Her gaze was direct. You were recovering from an accident. Besides, we've only met twice. Something about her straightforwardness both challenged and intrigued him. Unlike his employees or business associates, she spoke to him without calculation or deference. "May I see what you do here?" Zara hesitated, then nodded. "I have 20 minutes before my next session." She showed him around the center, explaining how art therapy helped children process trauma, how community elders taught traditional crafts to preserve cultural heritage, how the space served as a refuge in a city where real estate development was rapidly eliminating community gathering places. "The owner gave us 2 months' notice," she explained as they reached the small office she shared with 3 others. "We've been fundraising, but commercial property prices have tripled in this area since Quantum Innovations established headquarters nearby." The implication wasn't lost on Rohan. His company's success had contributed to the very forces threatening her work. "How much would you need to buy the building outright?" he asked. Zara laughed, then realized he was serious. "We're a non-profit running on grants and donations, Mr. Malhotra. Buying real estate in this neighborhood is beyond imagination." "Humor me." She named a figure that would barely cover a minor acquisition for Quantum. "What if I could help?" he asked, the idea forming as he spoke. Zara studied him skeptically. Why would you? It was a fair question, one he wasn't entirely sure he could answer. A week ago, he would have dismissed the center's plight as an unfortunate but necessary casualty of progress. Now, something had shifted. "Consider it repayment for saving my life," he offered. "I told you I don't want your money." "Then consider it an investment." He gestured to the artwork surrounding them. "What you create here has value. Different from what I usually invest in, but value nonetheless." Zara's expression softened slightly. "If you're serious, we should talk to our board. But I should warn you, we're not looking for a savior who wants to remake us in his image. Our community has its own vision." "Understood. I'd like to learn more about that vision." Over the next week, as Rohan's physical injuries began to heal, he found himself spending afternoons at Umeed Center. What began as a straightforward plan to purchase the building evolved into something more complex and interesting. He met with the center's board, a diverse group including a retired judge, a school principal, and a former street child now studying engineering, who approached his offer with healthy skepticism. "Why the sudden interest in community arts?" the judge asked bluntly. Rohan found himself explaining about the accident, Zara's rescue, and the hospice exhibition. As he spoke, he realized how profoundly those experiences had affected him. Meanwhile, at Quantum, Rohan began joining video conferences from home, surprising his team by suggesting they consider factors beyond profit margins in the Bangalore acquisition. "The human impact should be part of our assessment," he told the stunned executives. "What happens to the existing employees? The local community?" Vikram muted the call afterward to ask if Rohan was feeling all right. "Never better," Rohan replied, and meant it. On his 10th day of recovery, Rohan invited Zara to his penthouse to discuss a proposal for Umeed. She arrived looking somewhat uncomfortable in the opulent surroundings. "Your home is very—" She searched for a diplomatic word. "Impersonal?" Rohan suggested, seeing it through her eyes for the first time. The minimalist furniture, the absence of photographs or mementos, the untouched kitchen. "I was going to say quiet," she replied kindly. They sat on his balcony overlooking the city. Rohan presented the plan he'd developed. Quantum would purchase the building through its foundation and lease it to Umeed for a nominal amount. Additionally, he proposed a partnership where Quantum employees could volunteer their skills, from accounting to web design, to strengthen the center's operations. "Why are you doing this?" Zara asked when he finished. "The real reason." Rohan considered, deflecting with talk of corporate responsibility or tax benefits, but something in her direct gaze demanded honesty. "After the accident, I realized I've built a fortune but no real legacy," he admitted. "At the hospice, I saw people with nothing creating beauty that will outlast them. It made me question what I'm creating that has meaning beyond a balance sheet." Zara nodded slowly. "That's a good start. But charity without genuine connection becomes another transaction." "Then teach me," Rohan said, surprising himself with the vulnerability in his voice. "I've spent 15 years learning how to maximize profit. I know nothing about maximizing meaning." A slow smile spread across Zara's face. "That might be the most honest thing you've said since we met." As the sun set over Mumbai, they crafted a different kind of deal than either had imagined. An exchange where Rohan would offer his business acumen to strengthen Umeed's foundation, while Zara would help him rediscover the human connections he'd sacrificed for success. "Your first assignment," she said as she prepared to leave, "is to attend your sister's family dinner this weekend. No phone, no business talk." Rohan raised an eyebrow. "Is that relevant to our agreement?" "Absolutely," Zara replied with certainty. "You can't create community connection through Umeed if you can't reconnect with your own family." After she left, Rohan stood on the balcony watching the city lights emerge like stars. For the first time in years, he felt something that took him a moment to identify: anticipation. Not for a business victory or market dominance, but for the simple experience of family dinner, of learning something new, of rediscovering parts of himself long buried under spreadsheets and strategic plans. He reached for his phone and texted Priya, "I'll be there Sunday. What can I bring?" Her immediate response, a string of joyful emojis, made him smile in a way that no quarterly earnings report ever had. Beyond calculation. 6 months after the accident, Mumbai's financial newspapers buzzed with speculation about Rohan Malhotra. The ruthless tech mogul had transformed in ways that baffled industry analysts. Quantum innovations still thrived, but with a notably different approach, prioritizing sustainable growth over aggressive expansion, employee well-being over extended hours, and community impact alongside profit margins. The most perplexing development was Rohan's regular presence at Umeed Center, now securely established in its renovated building. What had begun as a corporate social responsibility initiative had evolved into personal engagement. The notorious workaholic now spent Wednesday afternoons teaching coding to underprivileged teenagers and Friday evenings attending community events. It's strategic relationship building, insisted business publications. It's a midlife crisis, whispered competitors. It's growth, Priya told him over dinner at her home, where he now appeared weekly without fail. The brother I remember from childhood is finally returning. On a warm September evening, Rohan stood backstage at Umeed's first major fundraising gala. The center's transformation mirrored his own, once struggling and isolated, now vibrant and connected to a network of supporters. When Zara appeared beside him in an elegant blue sari, he felt the now familiar quickening of his pulse. "Nervous?" she asked, adjusting his tie with the easy familiarity that had developed between them. "Terrified," he admitted. "I've given countless presentations to billionaire investors, but speaking about personal transformation to a room full of strangers feels infinitely more challenging." Zara smiled. "That's because numbers can't reject you. Opening your heart carries risk. A risk I never understood the value of taking." He caught her hand as she finished with his tie. "Thank you for teaching me." Their relationship had evolved, gradually from rescuer and rescued, to reluctant partners, to something neither had anticipated. They moved in different worlds, she among artists and healers, he among entrepreneurs and investors, yet each had come to treasure the perspective the other offered. "Ladies and gentlemen," the MC announced, "please welcome our founder, Zara Sharma, and the chairman of Quantum Foundation, Rohan Malhotra." Together they walked onto the stage, greeted by applause from the diverse audience, corporate sponsors in formal attire, community members in traditional dress, artists, patients, and volunteers who had witnessed their unlikely alliance. As planned, Zara spoke first about Umeed's journey and mission. Then Rohan stepped forward, setting aside his prepared remarks to speak from the heart. "6 months ago, I nearly died," he began, his voice steady despite his racing heart. "I was alone in a crashed car in the rain, unconscious and trapped as flames began to spread. By any rational calculation, I should not be standing here today." He gestured toward Zara. "But Ms. Sharma doesn't believe in calculations when a life is at stake. She risked everything to save a stranger, asking nothing in return." Rohan paused, surveying the attentive faces before him. "That moment changed everything for me. Not just because she saved my life, but because she showed me a different way to live it." He described his journey from the hospital to the hospice, exhibition, from Umeed's crisis to its renewal. As he spoke, he noticed Vikram in the audience, nodding encouragingly, alongside board members who had initially questioned his new direction, but now witnessed its impact. "For 15 years after losing my parents, I built walls around myself, believing vulnerability was weakness and emotional connection was inefficient. I measured success in acquisitions and assets, convinced that was the path to security." His gaze found Priya in the crowd, her eyes shining with tears. Beside her sat her husband and children, the family he had kept at arm's length for too long. "What I've learned through Umeed is that true security doesn't come from isolation. It comes from community. True wealth isn't measured in bank accounts, but in relationships that sustain us through crisis and celebration alike." Rohan turned to Zara, who watched him with quiet pride. "I came to Umeed thinking I would save it with my resources. Instead, it saved me with something far more valuable. A reminder of our shared humanity." The applause that followed was thunderous. As donors made generous pledges and community members shared powerful testimonials, Rohan slipped backstage, suddenly, overwhelmed by the evening's emotional intensity. Zara found him there, leaning against the wall, eyes closed. "Too much?" she asked gently. "I've never spoken so openly in public before," he admitted. "It feels vulnerable?" "Yes." He opened his eyes to look at her. "But also liberating." Later, as they walked through the garden behind the center, fairy, lights twinkling in the trees like stars brought down to earth, Rohan stopped beneath a flowering jasmine arch. "I need to ask you something important," he said, taking both her hands in his. Zara raised an eyebrow, waiting. "Quantum is launching a global foundation to support community arts and healing programs. We've secured partnerships in 5 countries. The board wants you to lead it." Her eyes widened in surprise. "Me? I'm an art therapist, not a corporate executive." "Exactly why you're perfect for it. You understand what matters beyond balance sheets." He hesitated. "But there's more to my question." The night air seemed to still around them. Distant music from the gala floated on the breeze. "These past months, working with you, learning from you, I've discovered feelings I thought myself incapable of." Rohan's voice grew softer. "I've fallen in love with you, Zara. Not just with your work or your vision, but with you, your compassion, your courage, your willingness to challenge me." Zara's expression softened, but uncertainty lingered in her eyes. "Rohan, our worlds are still very different. I've watched you change, but relationships require more than admiration. They need equality, mutual understanding." "I know," he acknowledged. "That's why I'm not asking you to enter my world. I'm asking if we might build something new together, combining your heart and my mind, your creativity and my structure." "Are you proposing a merger?" she asked with a hint of teasing. "I'm proposing a partnership," he replied seriously. "In all senses of the word." Zara studied him for a long moment, seeing beyond the polished exterior to the man who had gradually emerged, still brilliant and determined, but now guided by compassion, alongside ambition. "I need time," she said finally. "This isn't a decision to make in the emotional glow of a successful gala." "Of course." Rohan nodded, masking his disappointment. "I understand." 2 weeks later, they met again at Shanti Hospice, where a new exhibition was opening. Unlike the Diwali show that had first opened Rohan's eyes, this one featured collaborative works between hospice patients and Umid's children, intergenerational creations bridging the beginning and end of life's journey. As they walked through the exhibition, Rohan noticed Zara was unusually quiet. "Is everything all right?" he asked. She led him to a painting in the corner, a striking image of 2 hands reaching toward each other across turbulent waters, one emerging from darkness, the other extending from light. "This was created by Mr. Patel, who has terminal cancer, and Rishi, one of your coding students," Zara explained. "When I asked them about it, Rishi said it represented how different people can help each other across difficulties. Mr. Patel said it showed that connection is possible even between the most unlikely souls." She turned to face Rohan fully. "I've been thinking about your question. About partnership." Rohan held his breath, suddenly aware that this moment would define his future more profoundly than any business decision he'd ever made. "My answer is yes," Zara said simply. "Not because you've completely changed, or because I've abandoned my principles, but because together we create something better than either of us could alone." Joy surged through Rohan as he drew her close. "I promise you won't regret it." "I might occasionally," she laughed, her eyes sparkling. "You're still stubborn and sometimes too focused on efficiency. And you still take risks that terrify me," he countered with a smile. "But I wouldn't have it any other way." As they stood together amid artwork created by those embracing life's final chapter, Rohan marveled at the journey that had brought him here. The accident that could have ended, his life had instead given it new meaning. The woman who had pulled him from physical flames had also rescued him from the emotional isolation he'd built around himself. 1 year to the day after the crash, Rohan and Zara married in a ceremony that blended traditions and worlds. Corporate leaders alongside hospice patients, tech innovators with community artists, his family reunited with her extended one. Their vows, written together, spoke not of perfect harmony, but of perfect complement, his structure supporting her creativity, her compassion tempering his ambition. At the reception, Vikram raised a toast to the most profitable merger quantum has ever made, though the dividends can't be calculated on any spreadsheet. The guests laughed, but Rohan knew the truth in those words. His life was no longer measured in acquisitions or achievements, but in moments of connection, with Zara, with his sister's family, with the communities they served together. Later, that evening, as celebrations continued around them, Rohan and Zara slipped away to the garden where he had first confessed his feelings. "Do you ever think about that night in the rain?" he asked. "If you had driven past instead of stopping?" Zara considered this. "Sometimes, but I believe certain souls are meant to find each other, one way or another." "I used to dismiss such thinking as sentimental and irrational," Rohan admitted. "And now?" she prompted. He looked at the woman who had taught him that the heart's mathematics operated by different rules than the mind's, that love multiplied when shared, that giving did not always deplete, that the most valuable exchanges couldn't be quantified. "Now," Rohan said, drawing her close beneath the jasmine-scented night, "I understand that the most essential things in life defy calculation.